Infinity Nation and beyond, we look at the status of your digital landscape and how it affects the growth and profitability of your business. On the show, we will be talking to business leads, partners in the e-commerce world, as well as some of our own specialist team to give you actionable insights and find solutions to help you on your growth journey today. We will consider new ideas, stretch our mindsets beyond the status quo, and in the process discover how to gain an edge on the competition and drive some great results.
Hi, welcome to another Infinity Nation podcast. Today I have with me Adrian, CEO of Go Direct Marketing. Hi Adrian, welcome.
Now, how are you? You good? All good?
All good, thank you very much. Adrian, tell us a bit about Go Direct.
Go Direct, long history. Fortunately, you can't see me, so you can't see how grey and old I am, but Go Direct was set up in 1999 as a list and insert broker, if people remember back that long. Yeah, I know, good old times. And I suppose now we are a specialist growth agency helping e-commerce brands grow their companies, specialising in both acquisition and retention. And I think historically we've focused on offline channels, but now obviously with the way things are in the world today, helping clients across all of their channels and how to grow profitably, I think is probably a good way of describing it.
Fantastic. So both the kid in that journey and that aspiration, and I say I know you guys focus or have historically focused a bit more offline, and we've been focused on online, but we always have great chats. And we met recently, and one of the points we were covering was saying, what is holding back businesses from growth in the current climate? And we both agreed we thought that could be a great podcast here to discuss. And see, I suppose challenge our views from each side of the table and see what's there. So the number one challenge I think we're all seeing at the moment is acquisition, becoming harder for companies and becoming more costly. I think from our side, we're seeing that there are certain channels that are becoming more costly and other channels that maybe are a little bit unloved and thus should be considered more to balance out that acquisition cost. But love to hear from your side.
We could start getting into old-fashioned inserts and door drops and everything else if you really wanted to. But anyway, I think definitely you're right in that acquisition has become challenging. I think partly there is, I think might have been a bit fueled by COVID, as there's more competition out there as well. But acquisition, definitely from an offline perspective, is proving more challenging. I think costs from all the offline perspectives, so print, postage, everything from data processing costs have all gone up. And therefore, I think we've probably seen on average maybe about 30%. So when you take offline channels and the costs are going up by 30%, probably similar in digital channels, the ROI that you have to get, it makes it more tricky. So from what we see, therefore customer clients' budgets have either stayed the same or maybe even shrunk, and therefore it's the bang you are getting for your buck is not quite going as far. So it's causing a bit of a squeeze on customer numbers, and that affects your growth moving forward.
I think we're seeing the same. I think I spoke to you about an analogy before. I used to put £100 of fuel in my car and I could get to Manchester, and now I can't get much past Birmingham. There's nothing wrong with the car. It's just the cost of the fuel has gone up, and so thus for the money I get less.
Are you not electric yet, Al?
No, well, I'm getting there. But that looking at some of the cost per mile figures on some of those, depending where you charge it, it doesn't seem massively cheaper. But we digress.
Yeah, exactly.
I think on paid search we're seeing similar costs, and I think the challenge there is, as you say, look, client businesses have put in cost or price increases, but not to the level of 30%, and so there is a net delta difference where they're short. So I think on the acquisition piece, as I'm sure you guys do, is really trying to double down with who are great customers. So it's being smarter with the data rather than the fire and mud at a wall and see what sticks. It's like, no, we need to be really clear on the right type of customer, who's a good customer, who's a profitable customer. I think that
lifetime value comes a lot into it. It's, I think, as we've discussed that, isn't it? It's the lifetime value that you get from that customer becomes more key, and then it comes down to the whole customer service, personalization, customer experience that you get out of them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know we're going to touch on attribution in a bit, but I think for us, it's also understanding the different channels at play to acquire these customers.
Yeah.
And how, I would say during COVID times, which is 3 years ago now.
It's a bit scary, isn't it?
Is paid search and paid social was heavily used.
Yeah.
And successful.
Yeah.
I think that we're definitely, because as I think you said a minute ago, the competition has increased in those channels because people saw that money work well during those times, and thus that's it's an auction, it's driven the costs up. So that we're definitely saying at the moment, are there other channels where there's headroom for growth and is more cost effective over a medium to long term? So organic search, for example, we sort of feel is a little bit of an unloved child at the moment, where it hasn't had a lot of effort put into it. It doesn't give the near instant gratification of, I've turned the budget up here, short period of time, we're starting to see the results come in. It doesn't react that quickly, but at the same time, it doesn't cost you every time someone clicks on a search engine result. So for me, it's a balancing act of the different acquisition channels available to you to see. And for me, I suppose it touches slightly on attribution, but we were talking about it when we caught up in terms of total advertising cost of sale. And is that the best metric to understand what's the total sum of money, be it inserts, catalogues, flyers, digital? What have I spent in marketing? What has that recruited me in terms of new customers, and does that meet the business's requirement in terms of what it's prepared to spend to acquire a new customer?
I think you've got to look at it as a total as well. I think that's a really good point. You have to look at it as a total, and if you are trading profitably, if you are recruiting enough customers, if you are retaining enough customers, and the whole business model is working, then absolutely, and all the channels are working harmoniously together, then you look at it like that and think, I can still grow and I can still make money. Then that has to be a bit of a key, rather than trying to focus down on the individual channels, which is where it all becomes a little bit more murky. The murky, dark world of attribution.
I think also you can get into a bit of a rabbit warren and get that wood from the trees view. Is like, I'm prepared to spend this as long as I can find new customers, and I only spend this to get them.
Exactly.
It's ultimately the top line requirement of the business.
Yeah, and if you are finding that the channels, I mean, if you are drilling down into that, and the channels are just because of the murkiness of it, some of the channels you're going to look at them and go, that seems really expensive, or that seems really cheap. But as you say, if you look at it as an overall, then I don't think you can really go wrong. But it starts to get a bit more tricky if you're starting to lose money on your customer acquisition. Then okay, well, what channels do you start to dial down, and what channels do you start to dial up? That's when you start to need to think about them from an individual perspective.
Yeah, I agree. And so, are you seeing specific pain points in the offline world at the moment in terms of web performance is tough?
I mean, definitely from a direct mail point of view, because of the postage and print costs, paper, as everybody knows, has gone up massively, and so it really is I think when you look at all of our clients, they have cut their volumes. They are still being very selective about their volumes. It's probably a good way of describing it. They have sort of cut the volumes down, so they're really creaming off the top. So really focusing on your best buyers and building models on your best multi-buyers, so the loyal buyers who have bought from you multiple times recently, modeling on those, and then taking the sort of the cream of the crop as to whether you're using the data pools, the Abacus's Experience of the world, and taking the cream of the crop from them and really focusing on those. And then you also find that from these customers that you acquire, they are long-term better customers that you get a better lifetime value from. And I think you have to look at the lifetime value because you aren't always going to acquire them at a profit.
I completely agree with you, but how many people sort of do? How many people are sort of hell-bent on, and it's an important metric, but I suppose profit on first order over that consideration and that vision of, look, I'm recruiting, and obviously dependent on business, but where applicable, that there is the option and history of multiple purchases. How many people, in your experience, no right or wrong, but how many people are actually considering, look, I'm spending this today to know that in 3 years' time this customer is going to be worth this. As long as I keep all my other activity going well, I mail them quarterly, 6 months, I send email, just a rough poll. 50%?
I think it's probably less than that.
Yeah.
I think most of them are looking at it from a, and it totally depends on the metrics of your business, doesn't it? It totally depends on your average order values, your margins, and everything else you're getting. We have some very lucky clients who have very high average order values and very high margins, and that makes life really easy, and they can recruit to the profit. It's where you're getting the lower average order values, the lower margin ones, that it is very tricky. And then I think you have to be, I mean, you should be from both perspectives, but then you have to be very focused on, okay, well, how quickly are these going to pay back, and make sure that, well, then you've got to be very smart about the retention as well, to make sure that you are getting the money back from these customers.
Yeah.
But I don't think enough people look at it from a lifetime value point of view. If you ask most people, I reckon, do a straw poll, I reckon 70% off the top of their head wouldn't know their lifetime value of their customers at all.
And the cost,
what do you think?
Yeah, I'd say probably higher.
Yeah, probably
85%, I would say.
Yeah. But it's a really important metric to know.
I completely agree, because I think it gives you a different mindset of an understanding. Now, it is reliant on you continuing to either buy or produce great products and evolve the range. It does seem to do it, and all the other marketing strategies required. But it is also going, well, actually, I know I can turn that into a greater, more profitable client. So I suppose it sort of dovetails a little bit into attribution. But before we get there, just last one on acquisition. Are you seeing this as being a UK challenge, or are you seeing it in a wider market context, or wider geographical market context?
I think it is wider geographically. I think the UK, I think as we've spoken about before, Al, the UK is, the media over here are very much doom and gloom. And I think a lot of the time we talk ourselves into it. We talk ourselves into, that's what happens.
Yeah.
And obviously the next biggest market, the bigger market is the States. And I do think that it is easier over there, a lot more to go at. But again, I think it is being squeezed over there as well. But I think there always seems to be behind us. I think we always start to struggle first. And I don't know whether that's just because of the positivity, or or whether there's more people, bigger market, everything else. It's more, I don't know, but it always seems to happen that way.
I mean, they got 10 times the population for us over the UK. So I mean, that just means that spreads the pain point to a wider, dilutes it to some degree. I think I'm with you. I think Europe is probably feeling the pain a bit more than the UK, is what I'm seeing, and it seems to be still a bit challenging to get into shipping products into Europe.
Yeah,
it isn't impossible, but it's.
We're not going to start talking about Brexit, are we?
No, we won't go there. But it does seem easier to ship stuff to America. Without a doubt. And then you haven't got language barriers and all those things in terms of translating websites. So yeah, I think that it does seem a key and logical route.
Yeah.
But likewise, I suppose if you know who is a great customer in the UK, can you replicate that in the US and then build appropriate cohorts and build out? We've done it successfully, and we've seen it work well. I
mean, it does seem to help that I think average order values tend to be higher in the States as well. and they do seem to be sort of 20-30% higher from the clients that we see, and that definitely helps from a ROAS, return on the investment perspective. That really does make a difference. And I think response rates historically, I think they are sort of balancing out, have been higher over there as well. So the balance of it does make it easier across in the States. Europe, we don't do so much in, so I'm a bit can't really comment as much on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think Germany and France are big markets, but
yeah,
I think they bring their own challenges. I mean, geographically they're a lot closer to ship to, but then we have got the challenges of shipping into that environment right now. I'm not going to mention the B word, and the translation element. To do it properly. So
exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so we've sort of touched on it already in terms of rising costs. You're saying paper, print, postage. We're seeing more competitive in the digital world.
Yeah.
Thoughts on alleviating the rising costs or optional workarounds?
Yeah, I think as we've discussed, it's about being smarter, and I think doing more collaborations, doing from personalization wise, from being smarter about what you actually communicate with the customer, even physically. So in the parcels that you're sending out, whether it is collaborations with other companies, there are all sorts of companies out there now that are doing a lot more personalized product dispatch notes. People are going back to, as we used to do in the good old days, swapping inserts and swapping parcel inserts. And I think you've got to just, whether it be offline or digitally, I just think you've got to be smarter, more personalized and more creative about how you communicate with the customer to give you the edge. And I think all of these things will help.
I completely agree. And I was running one of our ecom collective sessions recently, and it surprised me. I won't name names because of the Chatham House rules, but surprised me at a large business, multi-million pound turnover business, weren't being smart on their database.
Yeah,
they weren't doing sort of what I call the show me that you know me mentality. You know, if you bought product X, are you interested in Y? Well, there's no point emailing them about X or marketing them about X because they've already bought it.
Yeah,
they weren't in that mindset, weren't in that space, but were wanting cost getting expensive to acquire customers.
Yeah.
So just it is extra effort and it is extra time,
but it's worth it.
But it is worth it. I mean, again, another business where we were helping them and we helped them segment that database down and market to people on about appropriate products.
Yeah.
Early days on email performance wasn't standout by any means. Reflect on it over 12 months and they've seen a 400% improvement. But it isn't, again, it isn't this light switch option that just goes, oh, bang, it overnight, it's changed. But start building a more of a loyalty behind the basis to say you understand the customer. They see that you value them, rather than just being a number. A wine business, you only ever buy red wine off them, and you just email them about white wine. They're like, they don't really know. They don't care about me. Why do I need to give them any loyalty? Yeah,
exactly. But totally straw poll again. How many clients do you come across that don't segment their emails? It's amazing how many just do blanket emails to the whole database, however many times a week.
Yeah, and I completely agree. And then you get the pushback of the effort to segment it, the different versions. I get that as well. But again, if we go back to our customer lifetime value, cost of acquiring a customer metric, it is a bit of effort. But if you build that loyal customer and it's costing you points of a pence. To get them to come and buy again. Versus I need to spend pounds to acquire a new one.
Oh, exactly. And if you can change the dial, I mean, as you and I both know, if you can change the dial on the customer order rate or the customer retention rate without a great deal of cost, and you change that dial by 5% on an order rate across your database, if they're ordering 2.5 times a year, suddenly change that by 5%, it can add hundreds of thousands of revenue to your growth, and therefore and ultimately ends up on your bottom line because it's not really costing you anything apart from effort.
Effort, as you say, and then just sending an email. It's like product range and product development, and just saying, look, oh, you bought this historically, we've now brought this out. I thought you'd be interested. I just think it does take that deeper vision, that deeper understanding of that whole lifetime journey and the value of it. And I suppose where you're going as a business. So no, I
think that's why it's really important, going back onto that, to have targets and to understand from a growth perspective how many customers you need to acquire, how many customers you need to retain, and therefore what your targets are, and then trying to hit those targets with the relevant ROAS that you have targeted, and that will help you grow profitably. But again, if you can change the dial from a retention point of view and up those by 5-10%, then it saves you acquiring customers at whatever, at 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 quid, whatever you're acquiring a customer at. It's a bit of a no-brainer.
So another straw poll. How many customers do you see, or people do you see, all have ROAS targets or ROI on acquisition? How many have targets on growing repeat purchase customer lifetime value?
I think we're going to be up from 85% there, aren't we? I think not many people do. Not many people do it, but it starts by not many people actually knowing exact customer numbers by day, week, year, new customer numbers, existing customer numbers. It's knowing your data, knowing the numbers, and then knowing what levers to pull. But it's amazing how many. I think there's been a lot of companies that have sort of the explosion of COVID, mentioning that going back, but then it's been easy, and it's been too easy, and therefore they haven't really had to focus on their numbers. So when times start to get tough, and look at how many e-commerce companies have gone into administration over the last sort of few months. If you take some of the ones we know quite well, don't really want to name names, but that's happened. But fundamentally, they probably should have known that from their numbers that they weren't going to survive. Costs were too high. They didn't know their numbers well enough, and therefore you can see it coming if you know the numbers.
And one could say maybe it could have been avoided if they were on it, but we are where we are. So any other tips in terms of reducing or helping dealing in a rising costs world? Because I think I'm with you in terms of repeat pay. I think merchandising is still a lost art online, or it's a forgotten art. In terms of, and like we were saying, when you print it, I always, from my side of the table, always seems more effort goes into how the catalogue is laid out, how the brochure is laid out, what products to show where, in pounds per square inch, etc. I don't understand why that discipline isn't, or doesn't appear in my experience, to sort of flow into the digital world and sort of saying, look, this is the homepage, how are we merchandising this week, what's the weather going to happen? What evergreen events are happening, right? What categories are coming? And so what happens is new range goes live. New products are at the top. Some best-selling products are now on page 3, and I don't know.
It's going back to ease again, isn't it? It's going back to ease. It's in a way. I'm not saying it's laziness but it is slightly in that you need to change things, because that's what creates the. As we all know, that's what creates the excitement and the newness and the relevance for the customer. And they go on and they see, new range. That's what creates the excitement from doing it, and therefore they will be more engaged.
So I think it's that balance, isn't it? Is that if we can merchandise it effectively, are we going to improve conversion rate, increase average order value?
Exactly. There's so many numbers, aren't there? That's the difficulty.
There are so many numbers, and I think then maybe we have to do a separate one on like what are the key separate podcasts on what are the key numbers to really be monitoring and measuring.
We can come out with lots of acronyms for lots of those.
We're trying to avoid acronyms, but it's trying, and I appreciate all these people are there's resources tight. There's so much to be done as well. But it's I think we mentioned it earlier. It was like, how can we be smart?
Exactly. And I think our job sometimes, as you and I, as consultants, if that's what you're going to call us, is to go in there and really focus on, okay, these are the ones you need to focus on. Yeah, it's nice doing the sometimes the nice things and the things that you think are the right ones to do, but really this is what you need to focus on.
Yeah, dial down on these key metrics. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of what drives metrics.
Yeah.
The old fun topic of attribution.
Love attribution.
Yeah. So, I suppose really we should have started with attribution, and then we could understand like where we can go and afford to spend money to acquire, but which is really probably the way it should be done, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Actually, let's understand what we've done so far and how we've performed thus far, and then how do we go and find more of, as you say, the great customers. I think in the current world, attribution is a real challenging one because there's so many ways of attributing it.
Yeah.
And businesses may have grown up being mail order first into digital. They'll have a completely different view on how to attribute marketing costs and performance versus a pure play that's come up and been digital only.
Yeah. We're just starting on last click, first click then.
Well, I don't think there's neither of them are wrong and neither of them are
right. No.
Which probably doesn't help the listeners, but I think
somewhere in between now.
Yeah, there isn't a magic formula. I think the only magic formula for me comes back to when we mentioned it earlier on this podcast is that sort of that TROAS or TACOS, that total average or total marketing costs divided by the number of new customers and the revenue that created, and thus how much did it cost for me to acquire a customer, irrelevant of channel or touch point. Does that, going back to our point of, is that driving the business's growth profitably or not, or is it going to send them to the wall?
Definitely. And I think that, but I think if you can understand all the touch points and understand what has influenced the customer on that journey, at what points, then you can start to think about the specific channels and therefore what is working. And yes, the first click, last click is probably the two extremes. Okay, and then is it somewhere in between? So if you've got all those figures and know what each of your agencies or whatever attribution tool you're using, what figures they report, then probably, as we said, somewhere in the middle is going to be the truth. But it's understanding all those touch points and having that information to at least make some informed decisions, plus taking into your account, as you say, the TROAS as well.
And do you, on that multi-touch point, as I agree with you, like if, for example, catalogue lands on the door, then someone sees you on social media, then they research you on Google, is that, are you advocating an equal split across the channels, or do you do a weighting?
I think the important thing is that pick one that works for you and then do that consistently moving forward. You can't chop and change because that just doesn't work. You've got to go, okay, this is right. Whether it is, something that has influenced it right at the beginning, as you say, a catalogue landing on the doormat, and then the journey to go through. Maybe you do a higher percentage to the first and a higher percentage to the last, and then the others in between get a little bit of it. Or if you want to do it linear, just do it linear across all of them, depending on how many touch points there are. But then again, we do see some customers that have sort of 25, 30 touch points along their journey. So it starts to become a little diluted at that point.
Yeah, and I suppose a lot of that depends on average order value and how much of a considered purchase it is.
Yeah, but exactly that too.
And in a world of attribution, in an omni-channel world, rather than a pure direct sales, be it catalogue, web, do you have any view on that side of it? We're just looking at testing where stores have, for example, Shopify tills, capturing that data and seeing if digital had an influence in driving them to store.
I totally agree. If you can marry them up, then you've got to include that too. I totally agree. And I think Shopify POS seems to be becoming more and more popular, doesn't it? And therefore, if you can feed everything in and you have that as part of the touch points, then happy days. You need to have that if you can.
Yeah, whether it's Shopify POS or
not that I was plugging them or anything.
Yeah, or a loyalty program.
Yeah,
where
exactly.
you're still capturing the email. You know, for me, it's just
Yeah.
The
trick is tying them up on just email address is always tricky.
Yeah, you're never going to get 100% accuracy on it, but I think it gives a good indication. I don't know what you're seeing, but I think we're seeing the clients where omni-channel experience is available are the businesses are doing slightly better than the pure plays at the moment,
Agree.
where the customer's got, actually, I'm going to go out on the high street the weekend, I'll go and have a look here, or I want to go touch feel it, rather than...
That's a whole new topic, isn't it? That we can start to get onto the resurgence of the high street, because I do think it does seem to be having a bit of a resurgence at the moment.
I think, and I use this example, I think it's just, how does the customer want to shop at that time with the business? You know, like,
it's choice.
I was cycling the other week and I blew a tire out. I was like, oh, but I need to get a new one, and Googled tire size I wanted, looked around, saw a well-known car manufacturers and bike, they do bikes as well, had one, and I could go and buy it in 2 local stores. I could reserve it and go and pick it up in an hour.
Yeah.
If I didn't need it today, they could post it to me and it'd be with me tomorrow. I mean, for me, that's service.
Yeah, convenience and choice.
Yeah.
What every customer wants, and personalised experience.
Yeah, I suppose it's them having the systems, knowing that they could show what my nearest stores were, that they could reserve me one, because I'm not going to waste a journey, and it's there for me to go pick up if I really need it. If I want it tomorrow, then happy day. So yeah, I think that, but again, that all comes back to it. You know, in that scenario, is that attributed back all to Google, or is Google? You know, it is complex.
Again, I think going back to the first point, I think consistency. I think pick one that works for you, based on sitting around with the marketing team and understanding what's most important. You think in the journey, you know your business better than most people, and then sticking with that and measuring consistently.
I think that's key, isn't it? And benchmarking it over a number of years.
Definitely. We're going to start on benchmarking again now.
Say again?
We're going to start on benchmarking now.
No.
Could be here for hours, Al.
Yeah, I know. I think it's such an important topic, isn't it? You know, as you say, go back to the business growth in the current climate. There is so much to focus and dub down on.
Yeah.
It is tough, but it's not impossible.
No, definitely not.
And so I think what we're the aim of the podcast was just to help give people tips and recommendations. So I think you're right. Be consistent on what we're measuring. Look at historically, and then try and map it forward. But I think also allow for some S-curve. You know, Easter moves every year. Weather changes.
Exactly.
So I think sometimes you get hell bent on this month versus this month last year, or last month, and sometimes you just need that little.
Yeah.
Again, it comes back to what you sell. Higher average order values. You know, you might be spending today in upper funnel activity for sales next month.
Yeah.
You know, we've got 3 bank holidays next month. That's unknown.
Hasn't not sure that's going to help anybody.
But it might. You know, who knows?
Maybe.
If you sell party kits and street party kits, and it might do really well.
Yeah, you never know.
Cool. Any final golden nuggets that you want to share?
Final golden nuggets. Blimey, there's a question. I think we must have covered everything by now, and I think if we're going to have golden nuggets, we might need a separate podcast now.
Okay. Well, let's leave it there. Eddie, thank you so much for your time.
No, thank you, Al.
Great to have you on here, and
nice to chat as always.
And we'll look forward to catching up soon.
Yeah. All right, mate.
Perfect. Thanks, Eddie. See you soon.
Cheers. Bye.